Hey, this is Mortis, and you're listening to Heavy Demons.
Okay, dear Mortis, the Great Corruptor. Could you please introduce it to the Italian audience? We see a list of amazing names like Godflesh, De Krups, Merzbow, and so on.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't like to use the word remix because I think it implies lame drum beats and whatever. Yeah. But it's basically like a reinterpretation, in a way of the album that we did last year, The Great Deceiver. And I just sent, I contacted all these guys that I knew, or that friends of mine knew, and asked them if they wanted to work on just to take these songs from The Great Deceiver and just sort of twist them around and turn them into something new. And eventually, we had The Great Corruptor. So that's sort of like the basic introduction, I suppose.
Yeah, and are you planning to do some European tour later in the year?
We'll see. I mean, we were talking about it, and then for various reasons we couldn't do it. It fell apart because some members of the band weren't really able to do it at all. So that was kind of a bummer. But we'll see. Maybe we can reschedule. To be honest with you, man, right now I'm kind of looking into doing this solo stuff that we discussed before we started the interview, so that might take some time off. I might take some time off doing that stuff instead. But
yeah,
if there's an opportunity to go out there and it makes sense to do the industrial rock band Mortis and do a tour with that stuff, I mean, I'd love to do it. It's just not that's not the problem, but it's realities of work, money, all that bullshit, that comes with life when you pass 30, I guess. All of a sudden you have responsibilities and you can't go out and play for peanuts anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
So that always gets in the way, Yeah.
Like back in the early 90s, you invented quite a genre known now as dungeon synth music. It's very popular right now. Which were your musical inspirations back then?
Back then, it was what kind of got me started were old sort of German pioneers in electronic music like Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, just to some degree Kraftwerk. Of course, you can't hear that in my music because it's nowhere in the realm of Kraftwerk or anything like that. But Klaus Schulze for sure, and Tangerine Dream. I mean, back in the early 70s, these guys were putting out these really sort of psychedelic, almost / electronic records with a lot of times only like 2 songs on them, like one long song on each side of the LP. And I'm not sure if I sound that much like them musically, but definitely back in the old days when I started out, what made me create these really long songs were those guys, Yeah. But I think the Mortis sound from back then pretty much came out of the fact that I had no idea how to play music. It just came straight from the heart and out through the fingertips, and out of the speakers. And what you heard was what was inside of me. It's very honest in that sense. There's no musical knowledge behind those records at all. So it's just really honest and raw.
Yeah, and there were also 3 side projects as well: Vond, Fata Morgana, and Țintele Diavolului. I don't know how to spell it correctly.
I don't know either. It was my Romanian girlfriend at the time, and I asked her, is there a way you could translate? I think it's supposed to mean the music of the devil or something like that, yeah. And I wanted her to translate that into Romanian. Yeah. Because, of course, Romania is almost the same as Transylvania, and of course, with Transylvania, you have all the cool vampires.
Yeah, definitely.
So that was my mentality, quite simple.
And what about Vond?
Well, Vond was pretty much created as an outlet, because Vond in the beginning sounded almost exactly like Mortis.
Yeah.
But the whole point was I had all these sort of, for lack of a better expression, very sort of youthful, hateful thoughts and ideas, very depressive stuff. And I've always been like a depressive kid, so very kind of dark-minded back in those days, and that actually followed me like this terrible shadow way into adulthood. But that's a different story. But so I just wanted to create a project where I was kind of like ventilating those types of feelings. And because I didn't think it fitted into Mortis at the time, because Mortis was really very, kind of stuck in fantasy type, or what eventually became Dungeon Synth, I guess. So that's kind of how it started. It was just me needing to find a different sort of pathway to express certain other emotions and ideas that I didn't think would fit with Mortis, and so it's just very simple.
And what do you recall about like the savage early days of Norwegian black metal?
Everything went very fast. Everything happened in that's, in the range of like maybe 2 years, maybe 2 or 3 years. It kind of started out like, I guess things started moving a little bit in maybe around 1991 with guys like us and Mayhem, Dark Throne, Enslaved, and Bursum, and that was pretty much it, a couple of more guys that was hanging around, and it just got really extreme very fast. And before you knew it, people got caught, people fucking died, and there you go. then we made a lot of headlines, and people went to jail. It happened really fast, man. It was, to be honest, man, I think pretty much 90% of everything that happened probably within the space of maybe 18 months or so, So it was intense. It was weird and it was intense, but we were all fucking teenagers too, with the exception of maybe like a couple of guys that were in their 20s. Everyone else were like fucking 17, 18, 19 years old, so it was like kids,
Are you still
fucking going crazy.
Yeah. Are you still in touch with musicians from that period?
Well, I mean, on and off with Thomas, Samoth, and a couple of other guys now and then. But I mean, everybody has their lives. We're all in our like 40s now, so most of us kids, jobs, focusing on music, stuff like that. So, I mean, I never really hang out with anybody, but occasionally there's going to be the, you'll have the occasional sort of like Facebook, hey man, how are you? And that's about it. So there's a handful of people that I'm still like now and then in touch with, but nothing like. I don't have, like, I moved from my old hometown in 2006. It's like an hour from Oslo, and about a half an hour from the Swedish border. And there might be like a couple of guys in this town that were around back in those days. There's like Metallian from Slayer Mag, it's not too far away from here, and guys like that. But like I said, I don't really stay in touch that much with people, but it's just the odd sort of, hey man, that's about it.
And something is going on like in Stockholm in November. What can you tell us about this situation?
Yeah, it's like a gathering of scumbags.
From the 90s.
From sort of like, there's the Cold Meat Industry 30-year anniversary festival that I'm doing. I'm gonna do sort of like an interpretation or reinterpretation of the Åndens Opera album, which is my second record. It was the first one that was released on Cold Meat Industry in 1994. And that's kind of like what happened immediately after the whole black metal thing, like I started the solo stuff, and I got sort of involved in the industrial scene to some degree through Cold Meat Industry and those kinds of labels. And all of a sudden, it's been 30 fucking years since those guys started, and Cold Meat was kind of still a new label when I signed, He'd only been doing it for a few years, and now it's like, oh my god, it's been fucking 30 years since he started. He's got to feel old now, man. But it's going to be fun. I mean, he still had Natives and Arcana, Order Equilibria, Race on Death, Sanctum, and a whole bunch of other fucking great bands, and I played a lot of shows with a lot of those guys back in those days, when I did Mortis as like a performance art project,
What shall we expect from Mortis with some new recordings instead?
Yeah, I got some stuff that I'm kind of working on and off, but I'm probably going to put it to the side a little bit because I need to focus on this revisiting of the Era 1 thing now. But the stuff that I started was, it was kind of like going a little back to that time anyway, so this all kind of seems like it's coming together in good timing, So far it was just sounding sort of dense and floating and stuff like that, and I think it was heading in a different direction. I mean, I like to change stuff around, So we'll have to see. I mean, it's very early, and I have said things about the music I make before, and then when I'm done, it's like a completely different thing.
Yeah. One final greeting message to the Italian fans. We know that you like some Italian music, obscure music.
Oh yeah. Well, of course, I'm into the Death SS and the Paul Chain and Black Hole. Remember those guys?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that I discovered that maybe only about 2 years ago. I mean, the Italian scene seems to be very like a labyrinth of obscure stuff, and I of course, now my mind blanks out. Now that I want to impress people and mention all these names of these cool bands. But of course, I was always a huge fan of the old Bulldozer. When they were a metal band, and they were quite got into that turned into like a techno thing, I think, for a while, and I'm not so sure about that. But the old Bulldozer, man, I mean, I grew up on that. They were like Venom clones, but that was awesome because I love Venom,
Yeah.
And of course, Paul Chain. I discovered Paul Chain around maybe 95, 96, when he did that record with
Lee Dorian.
With Lee from Lee Dorian. Yeah, that's when Paul Chain kind of broke into, I guess, not the mainstream, but a bit further out of the underground.
Bigger
at least for the rest of us.
Yeah.
That was awesome. And then I realized he wasn't even singing words; he was making up a language.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's fantastic, absolutely incredible. So I always loved Paul Chain, and I always knew the name from the Death SS story, and so I've been into Death SS since like fucking I don't know. Maybe 1991 or something like that. Back in those days, especially over here in, I guess, in Scandinavia, maybe even in this part of Europe, they were really obscure. Not a lot of people knew about them. Now they're really well known. But back then it was like who? Death SS. Yeah, they're like this great band from Italy.
Yeah, with that crazy look,
Yeah, back in those days, yeah, with the prosthetics that they had. I mean, I didn't know about anyone else that did it. That kind of inspired me. Very interesting, and there's of course Mortiis Drape from back in the days, kind of like an occult black metal band.
Yeah.
Really like those guys too. Very cool. What's the guy's name? Like something with perversion?
Maybe Wildness Perversion.
Yes, exactly. That's him. Wildness Perversion. Of course, I was going to say perversion and something with winds, and then I was like, no, that's not it. It was something different but similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, very nice guy. There's a lot of great, cool stuff that I always thought Italy was fascinating with the bands coming out of there.